So yeah, let me introduce Bob. So he's been a corporate lawyer actually for more than 40 years, and he was a partner in two of America's largest law firms, and he represented companies and investment banks in transactions that raised actually billions of dollars from Wall Street. And before that, he was an accountant, tax specialist, and auditor, so I would say he totally knows what he's speaking about. And what I find remarkable is that for much of the last 10 years, he actually investigated the cause of the financial crisis of 2008 and worked with the US Department of Justice, prosecuting the banks, which fraudulently sold nearly 2 trillion of shady mortgages to investors. What a number, right? So Bob was the first to publicly identify the fraud and how it was perpetrated. And his participation and prosecution was vital to the recovery from the banks of nearly $70 billion. So I'm really delighted that he took the time to be with us, that we managed to have Zoom also work for him. And so I'd love to dive right away into the topic. Bob, without much further ado, first of all, thanks for being with us. And just explain us the idea that you generated, the proposition of the Code for Corporate Citizenship. And I think you need to unmute yourself, because then we could actually hear what you're saying and we're all curious about it. So there's a little button down there on Zoom where you can mute, unmute. Awesome, excellent.
I'm a very good lawyer, but I was a very good lawyer, but I'm never much of a computer expert. The code is 28 words that, when added to the duty of directors in the corporate law, will once again impose the obligations of citizenship on companies. It balances the duty of directors to make money for shareholders with duties to protect the environment, human rights, the dignity of employees, the public health and safety, and the welfare of the communities in which the company operates. The change is spelled out in this slide. Do you have it up, Ricky?
Yes, I do, actually.
There we go.
There we go. I hope you can all see it, because this is the core, actually, of everything.
As you can see, what the Code for Corporate Citizenship does, it changes the rules of how corporations are governed. From what it currently is, which is basically to act in the best interests of the corporation, it adds a caveat of 28 words to that duty, and those 28 words are, but not at the expense of the environment, dignity of employees, human rights, the public health and safety or welfare of the communities in which the corporation operates. When corporations were first originated, the benefits of being able to operate in corporate form were conditioned on the corporation's continued good behavior. In the United States, about 140 years ago, politicians decided that in order to attract more business, they would eliminate that caveat or the requirement of continued good behavior. It's now clear that that was a mistake. The code would reverse that mistake, making corporate behavior more socially responsible and the economy more sustainable.
So why is it important, Bob, that corporations be obligated to be good citizens?
Well, the law says that the directors have a duty to make money for shareholders. Or to act in the best interest in the corporation. And the courts have interpreted this to mean preserve the corporation's assets and make money. This is logical. Investors want to know that when they put money in a company, that the directors are going to safeguard it and use it to make money for them. This law, the existing law basically guarantees that. To satisfy the duty, directors hire senior managers and senior managers hire subordinates. And everybody in the corporation understands the duty is to help directors fulfill this duty to make money for shareholders. Orders come on how to do that come down from on high, and everybody must follow. But requiring directors to act in the best interest of the corporation adversely affects corporate behavior. That is, it affects corporate behavior for the worse in two ways. Most corporate abuse of the public interest doesn't happen when you're setting up a corporation. It happens years after. It starts from the beginning, but the truth is people don't understand that it's happening until somehow it gets discovered, for instance, that tobacco causes cancer, or that burning fossil fuels creates greenhouse emissions and can cause climate change. By that time, the corporations have millions or even billions or even tens of billions of dollars invested. They can't stop doing what they're doing, because if they did, they would have to write off those investments. So the duty to act in the best interest of the corporation keeps them from stopping. In fact, it usually encourages them to pursue a strategy of denying that it's happening, and then finding ways to slow down any change that would keep them from acting the way they have been. This promotes additional abuse of the of the public interest, be it the environment, the rights, the dignity of employees, or other elements of the public interest. The second thing is that corporations generate two kinds of costs. There are costs that are internal, labor cost, utility cost, raw material costs, and there are costs that are external, pollution, the healthcare costs for people who buy their products that hurt them, costs that the public has to pick up otherwise because they pay less than a living wage, for instance. Think of these as internal and external costs. Not having a duty to the public encourages companies to continue externalizing costs. And this is the essence of poor citizenship. Unless costs can be recouped through higher prices, there's no incentive for anybody in the corporation to recommend or suggest that maybe the external cost should be internalized or reduced. And so that's why it's so important that corporations, why the duty of directors is so important. It basically keeps corporations from being good citizens.
But what I'm wondering, Bob, actually, isn't corporate behavior anyways already heavily regulated by environmental, labor, consumer, and other laws?
It is, and it isn't. There are there is lots of business regulation that companies have to comply with. But I suggest to you that this kind of regulation is where and how much regulation, because the laws are not the same in every jurisdiction, and they're more lenient in some places than they are in others. And this incentivizes companies to move their plants to places that are less regulated, to move their facilities. And the other thing that can happen is legislators can encourage companies to stay by making the regulation less. So we're not really eliminating public abuse of the public interest or corporate abuse of the public interest. We're pushing it around from one jurisdiction to another, and it's a matter of always allowing some abuse. We're not winning this war.
So how do you make sure that the obligations that you impose are effective?
implementing the thing about the code is it acts at the director level. Everything that happens in the corporation happens at the direction of the directors. And what we're doing essentially is we're telling directors it's no longer sufficient that all you do is make money, that your job is just to make money. We're balancing this duty with the duty to protect the public interest at the same time. And by doing that in a way that is relatively simple, that everybody can understand, you essentially make it everybody's job in the corporation to speak up when the company is doing something that harms the environment, doesn't respect the dignity of employees, etc.
So what is really special, what I understand about this approach, is also that then it would be valid actually for all companies. It is not something that is, what you would see with the B Corps, for example. Once you're a B Corp, then you oblige yourself actually to certain behaviors, let's say. But if we get the Code for Corporate Citizenship really implemented, then it would be a law basically for everyone, right?
Well, no, the Code for Corporate Citizenship is a change in the law. The whole idea, there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of change. When I started writing about this 20 years ago, people laughed at me. They said, how are you going to get corporations to care about anything other than making money? Well, in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of change in my direction, if you will. B corporations have come into being, and for those of you who don't know what they are, they're an idea that was founded by a company in Berwyn, Pennsylvania called B Labs, and if you talk to them, they'll tell you that they took the Code of Corporate Citizenship to start. But what they do is they provide a vehicle through which companies can voluntarily pursue two objectives. One, making money for shareholders, but two, providing a social benefit. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's voluntary. The whole idea behind the code is to make this change compulsory and apply it to all companies.
Now I'm wondering, how did you come up with this idea?
Again, about 20 years ago, I sat down for lunch with a professor of social policy at the University of Sydney. And he was trying to get corporate CEOs in Australia to consider improving human rights in the workplace. And he said, Bob, why is it when I sit down with these CEOs, it's not like they're against it, they just don't even care. And I said to him, I said, well, Stuart, the answer to that is it's not on their agenda. It's not part of their job. CEOs have a duty to make money for shareholders, full stop. As long as they're not illegally violating the human rights of their employees or other people, it doesn't come into consideration. What happens is big companies have human resources departments. Those human resources departments look out for the rights of employees. The corporation treats the rights of employees essentially as a cost. If something changes that requires the company to do more to protect human rights, like a change in the law, and that has a significant cost, at that point, it'll come to the attention of the CEO, but otherwise the CEO isn't concerned about human rights at all. So he said, great, write me a chapter for this book I'm writing on it. The book was called Corporations and Human Rights, a Dialogue. And I sat down and I started to write the chapter. And I started to think, well, corporations, they only exist because there are laws that allow for their existence. Those laws were passed to promote the common good. Why is it that we don't require them to recognize human rights? Why is it that we don't require them to respect the environment, the public health and safety, the dignity of employees, and the welfare of our communities? And not only that, couldn't we require them to do that? couldn't we make it mandatory? So I started thinking about a way to do that. The truth of the matter is that in the United States, some pretty smart corporate attorneys that I used to work with came up with a statute called the stakeholder statute. And what this says is that in the event the corporation comes under a attack from a hostile takeover, it can decide to take a lower bidder in a hostile takeover out of respect for the environment and the community and employees, and other similar elements of the public interest. And I said, well, that's interesting. If they can do it when they're under attack in a hostile takeover, why don't we make it work so it works 24/7 and make it not make it voluntary, make it compulsory. And that's how I came up with the code.
Amazing. What a story. Bob, what I'm wondering, I mean, you've been actually advocating for this since very long now, and I'm sure there would be people who say, come on, it can't be that easy. It can't be that simple. Or maybe can it be?
Well, I think it is that simple, actually. What was hard before was that there was a lot of opposition, and basically it was the position of big corporations that their duty was only to shareholders. That changed, believe it or not, about a year ago in August, when the Business Roundtable in America decided, where 181 CEOs of America's largest corporations said, no, the duty of directors is the object of the corporation is to make money for shareholders, but also it has to consider the interests of the environment, employees, and the community in which it operates. So that was a radical change in the thinking of the opposition. A lot of people thought that they were basically engaging in public relations, and that may be the case. But if that's the case, you know, we have them where we want them, in that they have said corporations can do both, make money for shareholders and protect its public interest at the same time. And they should. Now is the time, I think, to pass a law to make this mandatory as opposed to voluntary, and have it be subject to application only when they feel like it. So I think things have changed radically. The environment has changed radically in the last 20 years.
I just heard a question in between.
I'll ask a question of Bob. I like the code, but aren't you assuming that the environment and the community and human rights are homogeneous and unitary kind of concepts? Because if you think about, say, Woolworths wanting to open a big supermarket in a little country village, some of the community will be for it, some of the community will be against it. They may improve certain parts of the environment and damage others. And I'm just not sure how you actually manage this multi-dimensional kind of situation that corporations are going to find themselves in. It just sounds like the only one who's going to win are going to be the lawyers.
I don't think so. I think that the code will be largely self-enforcing, and what it will do is it will change the boardroom. It will change the atmosphere in the boardroom when they're making decisions to make large investments and how they otherwise operate their business. I think that I'm not sure about your example with Woolworths, Peter. I have to admit I'm thinking of probably more major decisions than that. The decision to continue emitting greenhouse gases, burning fossil fuels, for instance. There's no question of the damage that is doing. There's an old saying that the law does not deal with trivialities, okay? I don't think what you're going to see as a result of the code, I think what you're going to see is a change in attitude at the board level and and throughout the corporation to make them more considerate of the public interest. I don't think you're going to see the plaintiff's bar use the code as a sword to constantly harass corporations, at least not initially. And if it comes to that, we can always provide a solution to keep that under control as well.
So, and Bob, one last question also before we, open up the floor to many interesting questions I see already in the chat. But I'm totally interested in is to know your thoughts on how are we going to implement this idea? Because obviously we are doing this interview now with you and this session, with everyone you on board, because we are interested actually, to really critically and positively, discuss this kind of approaches, because we certainly are at a time where we need this kind of like really radical changes. And also because we don't want to only talk about it, we obviously want to implement it. So what can we do as Global Impact Alliance, as all of us being Alliance members? How do we implement this idea?
Well, I'm reminded of something Mahatma Gandhi said when he said, first they laugh at you, then they're angry with you, then you win. 20 years ago, nice. They laughed. Indeed, at that point or shortly thereafter, a number of activist groups tried to take the code to state legislatures in America. And as expected, trade associations and lobbyists came in and strenuously argued that it was too much of a change and should be tabled. And that's what the legislative committees generally did. But the problem has always been for the code, the corporate opposition that the object of the company is to make money for shareholders, full stop. That is now being reconsidered, not because of something I said or but because I think because the public has come around to the idea that an economy that is driven only by self-interest, by the pursuit of well, a lot of people like to call it greed, but by the pursuit of profit that generates all these side effects, all these adverse side effects, is not the way to go. And companies want to be known as good citizens. It helps their brand. Branding is a big deal these days, and being known as a polluter or somebody that treats their employees badly is not a good thing. So I think the environment has changed for it. There are already a number of constituencies out there fighting corporate abuse of the public interest, who I think will be allies. First of all, most businesses do not seriously damage the public interest. Most businesses are small, usually privately owned, and they reflect the good citizenship of their owners. B corporations, which people have already mentioned, also business for social responsibility. There's lots of companies out there who want to do business the right way. There's a whole raft of investment companies that are working to help companies that protect the public interest. We know them as socially responsible investing, impact investing. These people make it their job to find investors for entrepreneurs that want to operate in a way that is sustainable, or develop technology that'll help others operate in a way that is sustainable. So these are natural allies. The other natural allies are environmentalists, labor unions, and other groups that are consumer advocates, other groups that are fighting corporate abuse of the public interest, one jurisdiction, one abuse at a time. What they fail to recognize, or maybe they haven't thought about it too much, but they're all fighting the same problem. The problem has the source, the problem, all their problems have a common source, and that is a duty of directors to make money for shareholders that isn't balanced with the responsibility to the public interest. So if we can find allies with these folks, with the environmentalists, labor unions, et cetera, and they can devote a small part of their efforts to supporting the code, I think that'll be a big help.
Mm. So basically, if you really wanted to implement that and support this implementation, or at least bringing it on the way, we would have to really have this multi-stakeholder approach, right, and bring together basically the NGOs, the civil society movements, the governments, the impact investors or socially responsible investors, and bring them around a table so that we could actually discuss this and see what are maybe also the doubts, and then how could we go ahead and implement it? Is that right?
Well, I think that's probably a first step, but I think there's also this recognition that we have allowed corporations to operate solely for their benefit without any balancing of their pursuit with a respect for the public interest for too long. The question is, do we want our economy to continue to go in this direction where we continue this fight, one abuse, one jurisdiction at a time? We have this tens of thousands of NGOs out there engaging in that fight. The problem is we're losing. The climate change problem isn't getting any better. Tobacco is still killing 12,000 people a day. We're being the public interest is being played, and I think people are ready to make a choice to change the way our economy is driven. The entire economy is basically the result of the pursuit of corporate profit. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a great thing, but it ought to be balanced by respect for the public interest. And if we can do that, we can end pollution. We can change from an economy that's destroying our planet and killing us to one that is sustainable. And I think that's a pretty easy choice for people to make if it's presented properly.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bob. That was amazing input already. And I see that people are excited, to actually challenge you and also have questions in terms of how we're going to implement it. So I'd love to just open the floor to question of yours. I see that, for example, Pascal is having a question.
Shall I say it? Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot for your attending, Robert. I like your approach, and what you mentioned before is also for me key, that we have to internalize the external costs. So I think with this approach of you and the internalization of the costs, we would have really a huge progress towards a sustainable society and companies. And I think I'm sure that we need to discuss this not only on national level. So for me, it would be key that within international organizations like the OECD or the WTO, this approach would be implemented. How realistic you think is this now? You mentioned already that the Chamber of Commerce changed the stakeholder value law, more or less, or philosophy a little bit.
Well, they changed the Business Roundtable changed the philosophy of the corporation.
Yeah. It was like law, but
that's the change we want. Okay, that's the change that the code represents essentially. And you're right, Pascal. Once you internalize costs, the good news is the beauty of capitalism focuses on those costs and finds ways to drive them down. So it's we do want to internalize costs. That's the whole purpose of the code, to take costs that are now foisted on the public and cause the companies that generate them to eliminate them.
And do you see that this is now discussed within organizations like the OECD or WTO, where it has to be really implemented? Because if just one country will do this, it will, yeah, we will fail on the long term. So we need this on a global. Do you see any progress?
Well, for the last 10 years, I've been working with the federal government prosecuting the banks, to tell you the truth. So I've sort of let this slip a little bit. But the time, I think, and as a result of the Business Roundtable changing its mind, I think the time is now ripe to start getting it going again. But you're right, it has to happen. It doesn't happen in every jurisdiction. I don't doubt that there'll be jurisdictions that don't pass the code, but I don't see corporations moving to those jurisdictions to avoid it. The reason for it is because it's not good public relations. Directors of big companies, they just want to know what the rules are. And if the rules change so that they have to respect the public interest, to tell you the truth, I think most directors will welcome it. I think most directors, when they find out their companies are doing bad things that are causing harm to the public interest, they're appalled by it. But it's so I think that, it's just, the code is just another rule in some respects. If the rule is now we have to make money without damaging the environment, the dignity of employees, well, we'll change our methods to make that happen. It'll affect all companies the same way, more or less. I mean, all companies in the same industries the same way. So they'll have new problems to tackle, but directors generally aren't afraid of that. And again, I think giving them something to do more than just evaluate return on investment, most of them will welcome it. It'll be something that I think they'll enjoy doing, to tell you the truth.
So I see more questions actually in the chat. Gadi has quite a few thoughts, doubts, and questions to you, Bob. Gadi, would you just like to voice it yourself?
Yes, please. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
One question is, what's happening in other countries? Is it the law that governs corporates in Europe, in Western Europe, which is much more social democratic anyway in its nature, in its tradition? So is it by law, by such a law, or by other laws that the atmosphere is different? That's one question. The second question is, where are you in this? Who is behind you already? Are we talking very theoretical, or is there something changing these days? Yeah, in general, I think, why not generalize the expectations of corporates to adhere with the SDGs? If we're going somewhere, if we expect corporates to care about the world, why not say simply corporates are expected to adhere with the UN sustainability goals, which again, most managers of any corporate and company would accept? 3 questions.
I think that let's start. Give me your first question again, quickly.
First question is how US-centric is the whole idea? I mean, is the law different in Europe, for example, in Western Europe?
As you may have guessed from my accent, I'm American, but I live in Australia, and I'm also an Australian citizen. So the idea it comes mainly from America. And the truth is that I think probably capitalism in America is more predatory there than maybe any place in the world. We have this problem of being only about making money on steroids, if you will. We're and we treat our employees worse than any Western developed country in the world. We don't pay a living wage in most cases. We don't provide pension benefits. We don't provide health benefits. And so when I wrote the code, my original, I almost stopped at 8 words, but not at the expense of the environment, because I thought that was the #1 issue. But over the past 20 years, I've come to think that at least in America, the problem is the #1 problem is really the dignity of employees, but we also have a bad environmental problem. So I have 5 elements in the public interest that I talk about. They apply more in some places than others. I think Western Europe has a much more enlightened view of the corporation probably than making the code less necessary, but I think still desirable. Whether we should tie it to sustainable development goals of the UN, I like, but not at the expense of the environment, okay? I think that's easier. The problem when you get specific with corporate business regulation is that everything you get specific about, you make everything else legal. And I think it's better to be broader and require respect for the environment than
SDGs is all about the environment.
What's that?
SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals, are all about the environment and society, but of course.
Yes. I am not familiar with them as clearly you are. And I would be open to looking into that. But one of the things you need to remember when you make a change in corporations is you have to make it simple so that everybody can understand it. And I think that argues for being more concise and less specific. The broader, I think, in this case, in terms of respect for the public interest, the better.
And who's behind it? How theoretical is the whole idea from your perspective?
The idea is pretty theoretical.
Okay, I thought so. Okay.
I started writing about it 20 years ago. People like B Labs got started about, I'd say about 15 years ago. But there has been a move. People are recognizing that there's something wrong with an economy that's driven by entities that have no respect for the public interest. We can't protect the public interest with what I call where and how much legislation. It just doesn't work. What we need is directors that have a responsibility to the environment, human rights, the public health and safety, the dignity of
environmentalists,
and then help that along with specific legislation if necessary. But trying to put a rule in every jurisdiction with regard to every specific abuse, that system doesn't work. We ought to know that by now.
Actually, every environmentalist and every social activist agrees with that, says that for this one say that corporates are, are the bulldozers, especially in the US, that ruin the society and the environment. You're totally with them.
No, but the point is, I think when I first said it, I'm not sure anybody agreed with me. But I think that over the past 20 years, there's been tremendous movements towards recognition of this, that what we're doing now isn't working. What can we do to make the engine of our economy more respectful of the public interest? The only way you can do that, because everything that happens in the corporation happens because the directors, because there's this objective of making money. If we change the objective, we will change the result.
It's changing the whole nature of the US.
And in order to change the objective, you want to change it in a way that's easily understandable so everybody can get it and everybody can help enforce it. Right now, if I'm an employee in a company that burns fossil fuels, there's nothing in it for me to suggest that maybe we shouldn't be doing that. The duty of directors is still to make money for shareholders. And if anything I suggest is going to increase that cost in a way that can't be recouped by additional revenues, I'm going to be laughed at. I'm going to be thought of as naive. If we change the duty of directors so that they have an obligation to protect the environment, then that changes the ball game. Everybody in the corporation will have the ability to speak up. It'll become part of their job. And I think that what will happen is there'll be a lot of corporate lawyers running around saying, we don't know what this means, but what they're going to decide it means is that the rules of the game have changed, and now we have to improve our systems from this day forward so that we damage less and less of the public interest every year. And if it's and the other thing is that Wall Street will help police that, because if you're not making changes that are reducing your impact on the public interest, they're going to stop investing in you. And because they're going to see a giant liability arising on the horizon that they'll want no part of. The other thing is that I think that this will have the effect of spurring investment in new technologies that help internalize costs, that find ways to reduce those costs. In some ways, I think it may reinvigorate capitalism.
So Bob, we have another question actually from Mandar, which I find quite interesting, as he's pointing also to the inner changes that we need to implement this kind of radical law that you're proposing.
Yeah, so Bob, thank you. I joined about 15 minutes late, but I got the gist of your work.
So did I. I was about 5 minutes.
You joined at all, Bob.
I spent 17 years in the belly of the beast. I spent 17 years at Shell Oil Company.
There you go.
And, my experience is that I did not meet a single evil person at Shell.
Agreed.
Yeah. So they are same like me and you. They are waking up, going to work, taking their kids to movies, gardening, all this. But
they're good people. They're good people. When they get in the corporation, when they get to work, they play a role. Their role is to do whatever it is, whether it's finance, marketing, research and development, that helps the company make money. Their good citizenship sort of gets checked at the front door, and their job is now to help the company make money. It's nothing about the people that's wrong. It's the system that's wrong.
Yeah, my question was not about the people. My question was about systems. And my question was, unless individual transformation happens, systems transformation is a lofty goal. It's a great goal where the blame is not on you, right? So my question is, it's not even a question, it's a realization that unless my inner climate changes, let's talk just about climate change and the sustainability metrics on climate change. Unless I feel the empathy and the connection with Mother Earth, the trees, the snakes, the rabbits, how will you make a change in the decisions you make, right? That's my awakening. that unless this inner climate changes, where you feel a sense of connection with everything on the planet that is part of you, you are part of it. This
Right.
this training cannot come through a law. Training cannot come through a mandated stuff, because we are humans. We'll find a way to get across it, right? So that is where I think we need to have a awakening, and that is what I have been working on last several years. I quit Shell 4 years ago. I lost hope in my leadership. And the second point I will make for people here, because I have had that chat with Ulrike.
Could I discuss that point with you for just a minute?
Sure.
We have 2 more minutes, both of you.
There's a school of thought that if you want to improve a business's performance, the best thing to do is not to blame the individuals or the people for underperforming. It's to change the system, because it's a lot easier to change a dysfunctional system than to train people to compensate for it. The other thing is I wanted to say is that I think in the last 20 years, a lot more respect for the environment has come to the front worldwide, not with everybody. And there's obviously people who still don't understand the importance of it. But I think the movement is all in the right direction there. And if you're going to change corporate performance, you're going to need to change the rules of the system. Because right now, the rule of the system is do whatever it takes to make money as long as it's legal. And a lot of legal behavior causes incredible damage to the environment and other elements of the public interest.
So to close this round, as unfortunately we are already there at 12 p.m., at least here in Germany. I mean, I totally agree with you, Bob. We so need to change the rule of the games that we are playing right now. And I obviously, what you're proposing is like totally radical. It would also change a lot of things for many industries that we consider, well, harmful but normal. They are around, right? What we said, you know, the oil companies, let's say, the tobacco companies, those who produce and sell alcohol, that also, you know, we take, if we take it in small quantities, it's all fine. But then how many people die of alcohol abuse, right? So et cetera, et cetera. So yes, it is radical, but I love to have this kind of radical discussions, because I think a little change here and there doesn't do it anymore. And I also, I'm very glad that that Mandar spoke, because we also at Global Impact Alliance, we believe that we actually need both, right? We need to work on external change, which is more radical than we have been in the last few years. And obviously we need to work also at the internal change. There needs to be an internal transformation, I believe, in every one of us, so that we can actually join hands and implement, for example, this kind of laws, and that we make sure, that this is something not only exposed from the outside, but it's also something that we can feel and support from the deep inside of us. So I believe we need to work on this both angles, external change and inner transformation. So all this said, I would have loved to go through all the remaining questions that we have actually in the chat, but I want to be respectful also of your time.
Ricky, I'm more than willing to correspond with people that have questions. Feel free to give them my email, or they can connect me on LinkedIn. I'm available to do.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bob. That was exactly what I wanted to propose. So we will send out an email to every one of you who participated and everyone who actually signed up and who couldn't make it, also with the recording of this call, where you can also see the questions in the chat. And also I've seen Marius has sent some links that are important to look at with regards to the topic, so you could check that out. And what we propose also in the email, if you'd like to continue these conversations, we are very happy to host that. We can have another call together with Bob, and then go into the nitty-gritty details and discuss if you want to join hands actually to put this proposition forward from the now still theoretical phase into maybe a more practical phase. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. I appreciate the time that you've put into this. I hope it was a little bit mind-boggling, and you'd be with us also in the next session, which will happen in 2 weeks, and where we'll be talking about another radical approach, which is redesigning our financial system. So yeah, I wish you a good day, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is for you. Thanks so much again, Bob, for being with us.
Thank you.
And you all have a good time, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.